Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. I think this has kind of become a ritual for us. Every Tuesday, 11 to 12, we have quite intense conversations about taking views of experts on how we can enable the process of putting India back to work. I think just like all the previous discussions that we have had so far, we've put together an interesting mix of experts and panelists. We have Mr. Rajesh Sahay, who is the Senior VP and Head of HR of Wipro Consumer Care and Lightning. We have Ms. Shanta Vallury Gandhi, Head of HR, CSR and Internal Branding with RBL Bank. We have Mr. Vinay Deshpande, who's the Chairman and Chief Trustee, Mahindra Finance CSR Foundation, and also former Chief People Officer, Financial Services Sector for the Mahindra Group. So I think we have got a lot of experience amongst today's panelists, and I am sure that it would be quite insightful for all of us. I think I'm setting the context and few ground rules. As the question and answer with the panelists starts, I'm sure you will have a lot of questions in your mind. Please feel free to raise all your questions in the Q&A tab. And my request will be to use the Q&A tab rather than the chat box, because that's the one we will monitor to kind of put together all your questions so that we can respond to as many of them as possible. So please, all your questions and queries, do share with us in the Q&A tab. Without further ado, I think I'd like to probably start with the first set of questions. And yes, Rajesh, I will start with you. And my first question is, it's quite clear. I think with businesses resuming, putting India back to work will definitely be challenging. So how do you think, how, from your perspective, how are you trying to infuse confidence in employees so that you can resume full-fledgedly, to whatever extent you can, your business operations? And are there any new measures, protocols that you are implementing to ensure that you do have a safe working environment where employees can come and work at ease? So Rajesh, over to you, a little bit about Wipro Consumer, and then of course your response to that query.
Sure. So thank you, Rituparna, and pleasure being here. So my name is Rajesh Sahay, and I'm the CHRO for Wipro Consumer Care and Lighting. It's a $1 billion company having presence in 18 countries. The leading brand in India, and I'm sure it will resonate with some of you, is Santur, Yardley, Wipro Garnet, Chandrika, so on and so forth. So we are essentially in FMCG space. Now to answer your question, Ritu, we had a very unique situation. We never went out of work because when the lockdown was announced, most of our products were classified as essential services. So soaps, hand sanitizer, surface cleaner, hand wash were all classified as essential items. Hence, we were allowed to run the factory and also do distribution. Now, that gave a new set of challenge in terms of how to get the confidence of our employees to come and work in factories and continue with the distribution operation. So we were facing a supply glut situation than a demand glut situation. So the first 3 weeks or the 1.0 of the lockdown was about putting the essentials in place and getting the confidence of our employees that you come, we have created a very safe environment for you to work in manufacturing and distribution to progress. So that was the first phase which we worked on. As the new norms came in, we were able to operate our offices and get the sales and marketing team into place. So then it's all about getting them the passes, part work from home versus part office. For us, it was a unique situation. As an organization, we have never worked from home. We never had a policy of work from home. And anyone who would ask me that, do we have a work from home policy? My answer used to be, yes, we have. On all holidays, you can work from home. So that was the only answer I had. So it was lots of learning curve for us, for an organization, how to work from home and still be productive to the maximum extent. So gradually we have gained our rhythm. So one is through communication, that what are we doing as an organization and why it is important for us to be relevant to the customer and continue the supply chain. Two was, what are the steps we have taken as a company to ensure that you're working in absolutely a safe environment. Three, we also reached out to the family of all our employees in terms of giving them the confidence through health advisory. What are the emergency services we can extend when they need help? What are the counseling services available? And any kind of, if people movement are required, if there are emergency like a death in a family, as a company we stood up and helped them to navigate those difficult situations to get going onto that. So the business is okay. We are targeting to at least meet the last year Q1 number, which we will. So the B2C business is definitely up and running. The B2B business where we have a challenge because the customers are not working, but we should be up. What we are doing right now is to keep a track of things which are changing around us and very rapidly. So there could be an announcement by Tamil Nadu government one day and another district announcement some other day. So it's about resetting yourself at every point of time. And that's, I've set up a war room with some of my team members working on that and constantly tracking what's happening in every state, what are the quarantine rules, what are the movement material rules, and we are trying to put the best foot forward to work onto that. So that's where we are positioned at this point of time.
Okay. So, it is always good to hear somebody who's going to say that we will have a great Q1 because there are so few who can talk about it. So, so happy for you, Rajesh, and your business. That gives us a glimmer of hope that there should be some amount of economic activity that should continue. So anyway, I think moving on, Shanta, let me bring you in here. Let's hear from you because you are with RBL. So let's hear from you. What do you have to say? What are your thoughts? What are you planning to do, or what are you already doing? Probably.
So just like Rajesh, okay, so let me just give you a little brief about myself before I get to what we did. So I had HR, CSR, and internal branding for the bank. And these were trying times because you suddenly got announced that there's a lockdown, and that too, it was the end of the quarter. And you also know that financial services closes the books in end of March. So there are many, many aspects of closing your books because you're a regulated entity. So the first reaction of the lockdown, the best part that happened was we were an essential service. And I think that's what got all of us together. Just like Rajesh, we've never done work from home. And I completely echo his sentiments that, work from home is only on weekends. But the good news is the ability of the human mind to take control of a situation and to keep moving. So there were we actually did an ABC, okay? So the first was handling these anxieties of people. B was how do we boost the confidence of these employees? And C was how do we keep communicating with our employees on a continuous basis? What we did was the first thing was giving access to employees for accessing the systems. So we got about getting our digital story right. So our technological VPN access, we also allowed them to use their own desktops and laptops at home. We used every possible firewall to take care of ensuring that employees could continue to work like normal. The second leg of our struggle was to get our employees back to work. Because when the lockdown happened, how do you actually get these employees to come to work and start running your branches? But while we take a lot of accolades for having done all of that because we are head of HRs or business line managers, I think a lot we should contribute to the family and to those individuals who decided to come back and close the books in the month of March. Continue to cater to people in general, because ultimately it's all about money. Your money is in the bank, your checks are in clearing. You can't just say it's okay. There's large amounts of money going to come in. Businesses, their amounts had to come in to run their businesses, even if it was closure for that month for many organizations, small and medium. So I think for us, the first bolt came when it happened end of March. How are we going to manage? But slowly, we also started accepting that it is a way of life. So we also organized a bus for our employees to start traveling to work. Employees also, let me also be honest that it was not easy to get buses across the country because there were logistic nightmares. As essential services, you were being, asked through the way as, are you an essential service? So we had to provide a lot of infrastructure for them to have a smooth run. The third thing was that, how do you continue to communicate to your employees? So we actually started our learning portal. I mean, the amount of hits and it's got over these last couple of months, it has never happened. People started actually learning. And I think that's the single biggest investment that we as an organization have been able to make. All our portals were digital already. All we did was activate all those portals back to business. People started signing in to actually activate all their portals because they could start learning. Also, large universities started offering a lot of free courses. So our teams started socializing all of this to employees at large. And, this has been an opportunity for upskilling, a knowledge base which we probably were struggling with. Typically in a bank, you need everyone to do mandatory modules. In a normal course, if you want to get people to do mandatory modules, it's always a challenge. But in an environment like this, so there have been multiple opportunities. We can keep talking about the bad periods that we went through because, it's a lockdown, we have bandwidth issues at home, every room in the house is occupied, we have little kids who are studying and doing things on Zoom. I think there are many things that have changed the way we look at life. But as an organization, we've got our people back to work. We've been at work. Actually, honestly, this is one rare day when I'm worked from home. But so when I saw gloves on Ritu's hands, I said, oh, you seem to be working from office. But over a period of time, I've learned the art of not wearing those gloves anymore, Ritu. They don't help. Let me tell you, the mask is a better stylish element on your face. And safe. Trust me, you realize it. The only thing is when we have to do these kind of conversations with the mask, you kind of sound mumbled. And if it's a YouTube live, I don't want to look bad either on screen. Yeah. So, probably that's the reason the mask is off. But to get back to business, I think we got our people back. Right from day one, we've had about 33% of our workforce coming into office, coming into the branches, because we also did a rostering process. We did a scheduling process. All of this happened from people who were sitting at home and doing all of it. Where we think there will be some areas which we need to really be very clear on is productivity, especially of Salesforce, productivity of what we call the heterogeneous communities, where you don't have a transaction monitoring process. I think it will evolve. We are almost there, and we should evolve over these few days from now.
Okay. Thanks so much, Shanta. I think the only reason probably I'm wearing gloves is that I'm tired of washing my hands and putting sanitizers on them. So now you started using the gloves just for that purpose. But I'm completely with you. I don't know how much I'm protecting myself. And of course, the mask is always a better option. But yes, that's what we exhausted totally right now, putting sanitizers and washing my hands. Anyway, I think getting on with it, I think all of these have been interesting perspective. Vinay, can I bring you in here and let's hear from you? What do you think we can do? First and foremost, of course, a little bit about what you are doing and the business that you are overlooking, and a little bit then on terms of how do you suggest that we should be putting India back to work? What are the things that probably in your organization currently happening, which all of us can learn from?
Okay. So there have been two phases in my life post the COVID challenge. One is that the lockdown happened when I was in full position of a chief people officer in Mahindra Finance group, which has 4-5 companies. And later, 31st March was my retirement day. So I had a very nice virtual farewell like this, where all my team members joined on Zoom and then they sang a song and all that. So it was a very different experience. And post-retirement, I was given a role of continuing as a consultant mainly to mentor the new transition, which is happening in my position as well as other leadership members. But to be very honest, the time post 31st March has been so challenging that this role I was not able to assume in the right sense, because unless you are available on ground, it's very difficult to work as a consultant. So that's one challenge which I went through. However, I've been in touch with the leadership team to guide them on whatever matters come to my table from time to time, including the past legacy issues which need to be explained to my successor. So that's to be very honest and frank. The second role I'm handling is I am given charge of the CSR Foundation, which is a Section 8 company, which we formed mainly for the purpose of focused work. And we wanted to do some work in the area of village adoption when the concept was there. And also work with drivers who are mostly our customers. So these were the two areas which we thought we can do some work in CSR, which is a fairly good budget. And we can also have a, cumulative effect of, budgeting things for more than 1 year. When you have a foundation, you can work with a concept that yes, in 3 years we'll have this much of fund. Other subsidiary companies can also contribute, so on. So that was the concept. But again, to be very honest, the lockdown has put a lot of pressure on rethinking whether we should be doing village adoption or we should change focus to something which arises out of a social challenge which has happened on migrant labor, other aspects, and so on. So there is a lot of drawing board rethinking which is happening on that front. Now coming back to the business experience, which is before I retired, I think let me explain that we are very different from a bank because we are an NBFC and we are a insurance broker. We are also into asset management and we are into uh, home finance. And all these businesses of the Mahindra Finance Group are very, very physical in nature because we lend to customers who are in the bottom of the market. And therefore, the recovery aspect happens only with physical contact. Because these customers are not able to basically service their bank accounts because they are not salaried and they are not very digital savvy. So there's a lot of educating the customer which was taken up as a challenge in this phase and which is happening slowly. But suddenly there was an announcement from the regulator that there is a 3 months moratorium. So how do we handle that challenge? Because we will not get moratorium for returning the money to the banks from where we borrow. So it's going to be a cash flow challenge also. So these are some of the things which are being handled at the leadership level today. And business is good in some aspects. I feel the farm segment will do well. So tractor lending and all also should do well. But I'm not sure about automobiles because it's going through different challenges. One is the BS6 challenge, one is the year-end stock, third is the entire lockdown, the RTOs are not functioning. So it's not going to be very easy to look forward. Looking from a futuristic perspective, I think small automobiles and two-wheelers should do well because people will like to have a personal vehicle at a lower cost and not the fancy kind of vehicles which we are used to as management personnel. But the general trend will move towards those traveling by public transport would prefer to travel by their own vehicle. for some time at least till this care is low. And I think that could be a good business promise for the businesses like us in the automobile segment. I don't know about the digitization in this segment. Although the business is doing a lot of work on IT, digitization, etc., the customer competency on this is still a big question. So it's not about being IT savvy, being digital savvy as an organization. It's more of the education of the customer, his ability. How many of them will own smartphones? How many of them are scared to work with this kind of apps? And how many of them are confident? So it's a learning phase for them also. So a lot of our staff on ground has been facing a new role change of educating the customer to pay digitally, and that's going to be the future. I think it will take some time. It will be faster than before, because earlier also we were looking at that we have a overhead of a lot of headcounts, and with digital thing you can actually work on it. But however, it looks more promising now that the customers will get slowly used to paying through applications, and rather than expecting a recovery officer to come to their house. So that's some of the things. On the social front, I feel it's a big change, and people are finding it difficult. We all speak that, okay, it's easy, but bandwidth is an issue in those areas. It's a big issue in those areas. Stability is an issue in those areas of the net connection, and therefore it's not very easy. So we had innovated in the past of having point of sale devices which worked on the SIM cards, etc., where we could recover cash and give a receipt on the spot to the customer. But I think now everything will move to tabs and mobile phones, and the risk of the cash being handled should be lower in the current circumstances. However, the number of people, the number of offices, everything will go through a change. There is a big thinking on whether we need zonal state headquarters, and can only branches function independently and everything else be controlled centrally, because we can work with new digital formats. So that's a rethinking. Even if offices are going to be occupied in a phased manner, how much of it should be permanently leased? And that is kind of a rethinking also. I feel a lot of restructuring will go on in many of our kind of companies to relook at office space, to be not to be a permanent locked workspace for each individual, but like consultancy companies, you book your workspace when you're going to office.
Oh.
So, but all this is a transition, and I feel it will take its own time, maybe 4 to 5 months to restructure the offices to the new normal. And by that time, never know whether the normal will change back to the current situation pre-COVID.
Yeah.
So we are into that flux. The spikes and dips will continue for some time till the vaccine is found, and which I feel is going to be a new challenge.
Sure.
So that's the future. I think we should be geared up to look at those things in a more. So the word VUCA was used in the past in seminars very often, but this is the true VUCA which we are facing. I think everything is going to be unpredictable.
Right.
And, we don't know. Wealth is deteriorating. The distribution of wealth is going to also pose a lot of social challenge. I feel poorer could become more poor and the richer could face problems of, pressures on, sharing their wealth in form of taxation, in form of CSR, in form of donations, in form of extortion, whatever you see.
Right.
So that's going to happen, and that's going to be a new social challenge also.
Sure. So I think, of course, you're towards the end of it. You pretty much were driving me towards my next questions. But before that, I think it's clear to us that COVID has exposed India's rural and urban divide in a big way. And sometimes I feel in good measure, and sometimes that has good consequences. Like I was reading today's CMIE data, which actually suggests that there is an improvement in the unemployment rate as against what was reported last month. And if you look at it, while overall unemployment based on that data, of course, I've always been intrigued about how CMI goes about collecting this data, but that's a different subject. From it being about almost 18% same time last month, it has come down to about 12%. And then when you dissect the data, the improvement that has happened in rural India is far higher than the improvement in urban India. So, and I think if you correlate that to, again, another news piece which talks about that 10 cities in India are the ones which are worst affected because of COVID, I think you will start realizing the correlations here. And in a way, that's a good thing. If India does have a strong divide, and if rural India can continue to remain unimpacted, at least there is some amount of economic activity that we can continue to expect. And some of the government doleouts in terms of increasing Narega and all, if that translate into increased consumptions, some extent the economy will keep itself alive. So yeah, absolutely. I think those are some, and I'm picking this from some of the points that you mentioned about, like Vinay mentioned about how some of the rural markets and the rural consumptions, the ones which are linked to the agricultural sectors, have stayed kind of robust and consistent. Auto, of course, is going to be interesting because there are some studies which show that because of the social distancing and physical distancing norms, a lot of people might opt out of public transport and move towards having. But yes, there's a chance that there will be greater demand for two-wheelers or the budget segment of four-wheelers, if at all anybody starts looking at that. So yes, I think the next question that I have, and Rajesh, good to have you back. I think the question is, everyone's talking about the new normal, but what is that normal according to you? And how is it going to change our workplaces, change the lives of professionals? What do you think is going to happen here on? Because I think the emotional contagion of the virus will last longer than the virus. And hence, what's your perspective on this?
You're right. We are living in a new normal. So the two things which will happen, one, what will happen on the business side, and one, what will happen on our lifestyle side. On the business side, say if we take our business, we had to undergo lots of portfolio reassessment. We know that the COVID situation has brought in lots of new dimensions in our life, which could be antibacterial, antivirus, more hygiene product, more health related product. So you reassess your portfolio to see that are you relevant to the customer. So that is one piece which will happen. The second is a new phenomenon which is called as contactless economy, which will come up, will force businesses to be reviewed or may die down. So yesterday I was just speaking to my wife, and we're just wondering about the simple florist who sell flowers on the street, and whether it's a birthday or it's a Valentine's Day, and that's how they used to do business. We used to also buy a bouquet and hand it over to someone. Probably they're out of business because it's contactless. You will not look at that as a gifting item anymore, and probably you may just send an Amazon digital card as a gifting item because people may not accept the gift from you. So all the businesses will undergo a review and see how do you stay relevant in what we say in a contactless economy. Second is where the enablement is through digital. That is the second thing. The third is from a sectoral shifting. So will a overcrowded industrial area will now shift to a less crowded. So will the Pina industrial state will get little decongested and more things will move to Bellary or Mysore. Uh, so there could be a little bit of those sectoral shifting which would happen from a employment point of view, which you are highlighting. We will see because there are certain pent-up demands which has been lying. So there are the workers once went back to their hometowns are now returning in a gradual number. So yes, there will be a surge vis-a-vis the March and April data. But over the period, what we need to see that can we get back to our February figure or the January figure and then take on to the next level of growth. So the phase would be survival, then revival, and then acceleration. So right now, many businesses are onto the survival piece. Some of them will now move to the revival piece. It's like hotel industry. Read an interesting article that you will never be able to host large banquets where 2,000 people come together. So they are extending their laundry services apart from their food catering and so on and so forth. So that's the portfolio reassessment which will happen, which will go to the revival part of it. And then we will move to the acceleration part of it. So La Liga has started with empty stadium. Now, how do you still make money? If IPL has to be done in September with empty stadium, what is the model you will have to make money? Because finally, the consumer need to spend, the sentiment has to be up. And one of the factors which we see, which will lead to the sentiment being up, is that if there is a clear-cut direction saying that we have found an antivirus, which if administered, controls it and heals you, that will be one surge in the sentiment, and that's where the consumer will start spending, and that's where the economy will come back to the rail. The services sector will be under tremendous pressure, which is tourism or airlines, transportation, and so on and so forth. So it is still some time away where we say that we have bottomed out and now we are going to go ahead. So the forecast is, the forecast keep changing every day, is that end of FY21 Q4 is the bottoming out period, and only then we can look at upswell. So right now, everyone is in a phase of survival and a phase of revival. That's where we are at this point of time.
Yeah, thank you. I think couldn't agree more with you. So before I move on to Shanta, I would request all those who are participants who are attending this, if you have any Q&As, please start sharing those Q&As with us through the Q&A tab, and we will come back to you shortly on that. Again, for paucity of time, we will try and do the question answer with the panelists in the shortest possible time. We'll ensure that we don't spend more than 2-3 minutes in each of these questions so that we can come to you to address your questions and concerns at the earliest. Yes, Shanta, over to you. What do you think will permanently change now in our world, in our workplaces?
So, there's a choice between life and livelihood. Okay, so that's the new normal. Everybody has that choice. We're humans first. Now, when we look at who created this problem, it largely came from international shores. It was largely an urban footprint disease, which we passed on to rural areas. It wasn't something that emanated there and then came to us. I mean, that's something we need to acknowledge. So there is a responsibility to give back that life to someone whom we probably, snatched it away at some point of time. And I think we recognize that as individuals and as organizations. So if you look at our whole program, if you looked at, unlike Vinay, where he mentioned on the rural space, we found that our microfinance business, almost 80% of employees came back to work in the month of May, unlike the urban footprint. 100% of our people have been at work since June. So people have actually come back in the rural areas and have started catering to their customer segment very quickly. And their adoption of technology was not something that we did during COVID. If you look at the rural infiltration for technology was happening over the last 1.5 years itself, when we were funding the SHGs and people who were doing collections through digital mechanisms. Where we did see a dip in our business model was largely in the credit card spends, because people started spending on only, were always spending on non-essential goods. Suddenly there was this clampdown. There was this insecurity that started stemming up on livelihoods. So everybody starts saving. Now, what is that? That gives a great opportunity to banking. When people start saving and they find that your stock markets are not doing that well, or mutual funds are still under, different kinds of processes happening there, they usually will go to a bank to store their money, or will invest in insurance, largely health and term. So I think there are a couple of other opportunities that also came up during this period. If you looked at the latest research on the CEOs by Forbes, 65% of them believe that they will not see 90% of their workforce for the next 2 years. Similarly, Times has called it, COVID, the largest work from home experiment. So if you look at both of these, this is the normal, yeah. There's nothing called new normal. So as an organization, are we getting prepared for it? The answer is yes. We will have to recognize that, while going with what Vinay said, yes, we'll have to relook our real estate. We will have to look at what is the kind of, anxiety-led initiatives where they are non-anxious employees. So today, as a banker, you always looked at providing insurance to your employees. Today, we've put up a doc online, which is a combination of a help online, both for physical as well as mental. There are other challenges that we've started seeing in employees, because we have to get them back to work. It's a family commitment to get people back to work. Have we followed all the rules and regulations of what the government has been telling us? Yes, we have. Have we looked at employees who have got kids which are small to be brought back to work? No. Have we looked at employees who have comorbidities and are of a particular age and above? Should we get them to work? We have not insisted, but there are employees who still come back because it's a choice you make between your life and livelihood. And these are individual choices. They cannot be governed by organizations or by the regulator or by the government. This is a choice I as an individual have a right to exhibit and have a right to follow. As a business model, banking is where your people are going to save. If you're not going to spend on non-essential goods, where's the money going to go in the end of the day? It is going to go into your bank account. So for us, it's an opportunity. I mean, everything that's happening around right now at this point of time is we've understood that as a bank, we can work from home. We can produce the results that we want. We've had board meetings from people working from home. We have had branches, sales happening through a Zoom call. We've had employee interventions happening through Zoom calls. We've had, WebEx or Microsoft Teams. Let me not use Zoom as the only way of communicating. But I'm saying there are multiple ways that we found opportunities. So I'm not very pessimistic about this period, Ritu. Honestly, probably I'm a little more optimistic, but I do not see anything pessimistically right now. Haven't we had bad business models even when there was a natural disaster like a cyclone? We have faced dips in business in certain centers. I think this, we've gotten up to something which we've never seen. So somehow I'm a little more optimistic in this whole thing. And I do see that, yes, it'll take us a little while, like when I said 5 or 6 months, but I'm sure business as usual will come in with different models. Yeah. And digital and technology is here to stay. I think the challenges will be bandwidth. The challenges will be our own adoption. Are we hiring? Yes, I'm hiring. To give you some good news, we are hiring. Okay, am I expanding my branch network? The answer is yes. Have I issued letters to everybody who was on a WIP with me? Yes. And they're all joining in a virtual environment. So there is business as usual. There is a demand, and the supply will have to continue. And we are in the business of banking. We are in the business of people at the end of the day, whether it is our own employees or hiring people from outside or our customers. So I think I'm a little more optimistic, and probably that could be a little different from the way the world views it. But I am very optimistic about this period. Taught us a lot of things which we probably never thought we could do. It's also resilience.
Absolutely, Shanta. I think, I'm reminded of this favorite quote of mine of Oscar Wilde. It's always staring at me also when I sit, that all of us are in the gutter, that some of us are looking up.
Yes.
This, when you are in a situation like a COVID, I mean, optimism is your only ray of hope. And I think it's not misplaced. Like you're saying that, I think adversity also is the mother of all innovations and inventions. And also, what happens is, I think COVID has forced us to challenge some of the stuff that we've been procrastinating on. I personally feel COVID has brought forward the innovations that we needed in this country in learning and education, which we things which we probably were expecting in 2030 has been fast forwarded to 2020, because we are earlier the ayatollahs of education had an antibiotic reaction to anything online or digital. And I think now they are forced. Now you're pushed to the corner where you do not have much of an option but acknowledge the merits of online digital and how it can impact millions of lives at one go at a fraction of a cost. I think it has also, I'm pretty sure and I'm quite confident it's challenging a mindset around the labor laws, because people have really, the thing that we've been postponing and issues that we've been dragging for the last 60 years, it's now or never, honestly. So I guess, yes, COVID will have a lot of positive outcomes in our lives, and it's just about staying resilient for the next few quarters to come back to that level and maybe come back to a rhythm which is far more than what it was pre-COVID levels. Vinay, now over to you. I think I think we are already at 11:44. So my third round of questions has to wait. I'll probably move to taking some of the participant questions after this, and then come back to the rapid fire round. So Vinay, from your perspective, what do you think is going to permanently change? I know in your initial opening, you did tell us about some of your views on how the future is going to be. But tell us about what do you think is likely to change in our environment permanently, and also how, I mean, like everybody, there is an optimism in the air, but there is a lot of concerns around the supply chains issues which are likely to emerge, and labor being one of them. So, any thoughts from your side on that?
It's a fairly large question. So
The last question, so I just took my chance. Yes,
let me try step by step. One is that I think engagement of employees, which was a core activity for HR professionals like us and the leadership in general, is going to be very challenging in this kind of thing. I'm not more worried about teams which are already formed in an organization. But when a new team is to be formed, I think it's going to be very difficult to engage people to the extent of personal bonding on a virtual format. Let's think of a case where you have a team of 4 people working on a department or a project, and a new employee joins from outside. And now his bonding with this team is not going to be very easy in the new context at the this thing, and that's a concern. I don't have a solution immediately. So I think there has been a comment or a post on this subject put by one of my colleagues, and there were a lot of reactions around it. And I think that reaction was that yes, the first reaction was yes, that intact teams who remember that they had bonded personally are able to bond even in virtual formats. But when a new person joins or a new team joins, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge, because I know somebody more intimately when I meet him, when I socialize with him or her, and then that's the challenge which we are going to face, and HR will have to find new solutions to this. How are we going to handle this? Probably the other two panelists may have answers to this question, but I have this question in my mind. The second part is that the social distancing is going to create a new, process, which is going to be like a safety process in manufacturing in the traditional formats. You have safety guards, you have safety boots, you have safety dress, you have aprons when you are in microbial environments, and so on. So these are some of the things which people will have to get trained when, and there will be a lot of accidents arising out of non-compliance on these issues. So how are we going to handle that? Are you going to regulate? Are you going to penalize? Are you going to incentivize? Are you going to reward? And that's going to be a new challenge for the new formats to be. So it's going to be hybrid. I don't believe it's going to be entirely virtual. So when it is going to be hybrid, these challenges will continue, and that's going to be a new process. Your question on labor being available, I think it's also going to be a learning for the local labor, and it's also going to be a learning for local employment to flourish. I think I won't compare it with reverse globalization exactly, but you have to think local to a certain extent, that whether an employee will commute for more than 5 kilometers. We used to commute 30 kilometers a day on an average. So that's not going to be very easy in the hybrid formats. So new offices or new workspaces will have to be created as hub centers, probably as a solution. I don't know. Again, the other two experts can contribute to this challenge. But I think we should allow people to go home uh, in a shortest possible time when there is an emergency, or come back to office in a shortest possible call when there is a meeting. And those kind of formats will have to be developed over a period of time. Local skills will have to be trained. I mean, you may not get the great good kadia from Rajasthan now, or you may not get a good carpenter from say Bihar today, in all of us, but slowly they will come back. And so I think this has already happened in some developed countries, and the dignity of labor is high. And I think our country will slowly start realizing, especially in the urban pockets, about dignity of labor. We're all getting used to it, working on our own without maids and all that. And I have a comparison of the gig work. I mean, the maids used to come part-time to our homes. Now I think there is a trend of looking at local maids, or having a live-in servant. And these are the new kind of thoughts which are coming to people who used to have part-time help. I think that's the another kind of a change. So companies like who work on these formats, where skills are available on digital formats, I think they will flourish.
Sure.
I think I don't want to take names of companies because it will mean advertising, but you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yes, absolutely.
So those kind of formats will flourish more and more, and even people who are not used to using them will start using.
Sure.
So that's the way it is.
Sure. I think clearly, if you look at the contribution to GDP from the southern and western states have been higher, and the contribution to supply of labor has been higher in north and east, and hence it's but natural that north and east have been essentially the source of most of the manpower were needed in the southern or western part of India. And that's how the migration process has been working. So given the reverse migration that has happened, it is now quite an imperative on local state governments who so far could get away not creating local employment, given that they could always go out and find jobs in other states. Now I don't think that's a possibility. Now you have the burden of like the lakhs and lakhs of, let's say, migrant labor who've gone back to UP. If UP doesn't create good quality or decent quality local jobs, then we know how the social infrastructure of UP, which already is a question mark in some cases with due regards, can be put under strain, right? So yes, of course, I think, like you said, local employment and local jobs, local skilling is going to be prima facie the focus in the days to come. I'm going to move to taking some questions because I have to skip on the third question that I had to make way for some of these questions. I think very specific ones I'll pick, and there are some common strains, and hence I'll try and merge them. But yes, I think one of the questions which I'd like to take is that how do you see performance management system undergoing a change? Given that many things have happened. People have taken to virtual working, people are working from home, there is very little supervision happening. So anyone wants to take that question from the panelists?
See, we are in a business of outcomes. Okay, and we are very clear that it's an outcome-oriented organization. Like I already mentioned, that for transactions which are operation-led, or transactions where you have a lot of desk time and laptop time, there are tools available today to map productivity. All you're changing is infrastructural real estate requirements. Nothing else is changing really. So wherever there is a performance, so first and foremost, let me just take you back a little bit. The entire year of 2019-20 employees have performed. So this happened at the end of March 2020. It didn't happen in the beginning. I think the real story will unveil for the March 2021 on how are we going to evaluate performance, what are the changes going to come in. I don't think today is the question is still the right question to ask, because it's very important for us to recognize that people delivered till March end. Companies which are doing their performance today is for people who delivered March end. We had our metrics, we had our outcomes clearly defined, we had a goal sheet, and we will continue the performance management system as is. I don't think there's going to be any major change in that. And I'm sure it will be true for most of the other organizations as well. For people where the question comes is for 2021, and clearly 2021, we will have to look at outcome-based evaluation processes. Where it is a front end, where it's a back end job, I think it'll be very easy to calculate. But when it comes to a front end heterogeneous communication, where the roles are not very clear in terms, because these are customer facing, collections, our metrics will evolve, and that will take another 3 to 4 months, which will eventually, I think we will have to use tools, and it will have to be outcome driven. And that's how the performance management processes will evolve in the days to come.
Sure. Vinay, you or Rajesh, do you want to pitch in for this? Because I mean, I completely agree that for last year, performance management shouldn't change. But what are the changes we should be making, keeping in mind this current year and how it's going to be for March 2021?
So there are two aspects. One is that I agree with Shanta on her outcome-based metric. But I think the other side is not to be ignored, because there is something called effort-based metric also, and that's the effort-based metric is going to be very high in this period. I'm talking about the FY21, because how did we innovate? How did we gear up? How did we face the challenge? And those things are not necessarily outcome-based. While outcome is going to be the primary metric, the effort-based metrics are also very required, because innovation will take place in this phase, because necessity leads to innovation. The second is that how did we manage to change the infrastructure? And by infrastructure, I don't mean reality alone. It's everything else. Whether we digitized better, whether we transported the work from office to home very seamlessly, whether security concerns were. Now, these things can't be just outcome based. You have to also see what kind of challenges were looked at barrier by the individuals who have been given these goals. And I think that also needs a due consideration. I think the classical balance score theory talks of lead and lag indicators, and therefore even the lead indicators will have a play in this 1 year, and those will be mostly for preparing for FY22. It's not going to be the result on the outcome on FY21 immediately, but in future. And are we able to use this more optimistically? And so while outcomes are important, I think effort is also to be looked at.
Sure.
And that's something I would prefer to look at very seriously.
Yes, Rajesh, you want to add a few bit comments?
You want me to add, Rituparna?
Yeah, if you have anything, I mean, if there is anything additional you'd like to add.
Yeah. So I just give the headlines, what the way we are looking at our business, and maybe true for other business as well. One is that how do you reset the plan for the year FY21? Because it cannot be the operating plan which you would have done it in January, February for the year. So that's one thing which everyone, and we know that the global economy, the Indian economy is going to contract. And some may do well, some may not do well. So one is how do you reset, and that will lead to the new performance measure which you have. The second is every business will undergo a change from a portfolio review point of view, and hence what is the adoption that individual shows towards getting to a newer way of doing business. The third would be in terms of the way you do business, whether it's manufacturing process, service delivery, or the selling process. All of them will undergo a change. So what is the rate of adoption you show for the final outcome, as Shanta has rightly pointed out, are the three key directions on which we are working to ensure that we have a relevant performance measure. And one of the things which we are thinking that shall we still do annually for this year, or we do quarter on quarter because things are emerging on a daily basis, is another thought which we have. So these are the four directions which at this point.
Sure. I think all the questions that are coming in, Lakshmi, from you, Suresh, Subramaniam, Durga, good to have you back. Tenny Jacob, Karishma, Uday, Prabhakar, Sitaram, Nityanandan, all of them are relevant. But there's one question which have caught my mind. A lot of employees are struggling with managing their it's interesting, their own children's education right now, whether it's online or whatever the challenges might be. And do you think that employers have a role to play in helping the employees in managing this situation? Because if both parents are working from home, kids also online, I mean, is there any role or nothing really? Or do you think that individuals should really look at this particular issue by themselves? I know it's a very interesting question, but I guess the ones who have children are the ones who can feel the pain.
So as my other two panelists are still on mute, I've decided to take it on.
Yes.
So let me just tell you that, it's strange, okay? It's very, very strange, Ritu, that problems of motherhood have always existed, of fatherhood have always existed. And it's unbelievable. So not that today, because of COVID, I have to pay attention to my children. You know, my kids are old. I mean, they're much older. They're not little. But fact of the matter is, if I decide to work today, I always have a backup plan on who's going to take care of my children and how we're going to have it. Okay, this is not a new phenomena. Even my maid who comes to work every day knows somebody takes care of her children, and therefore she's able to give her time. So I think these are, if I expect my employer to define how I'm going to look after my kids for tomorrow in a changing world where as an employer, have I given them work from home facility? Yes. As an employer, have I given them access to technology and digitization? The answer is yes. But as a parent, you have some responsibilities to worry about how your children are going to cope with their study. As an employee, as an employer to an employee relationship, I think we've offered what we think is best. When we had little babies and there was no creche facility, and in our times, my daughter is going to be 25 and 19, we didn't have creche facilities. Did I ask my employer to give me a creche facility at that point of time? The answer is no. I worked out an arrangement where my children could be taken care of because it was critical for me to pursue a career and provide a life and livelihood for my future and for my children's future. So I said, as an employer, I would love to do all of this, but there are a lot of other employees who necessarily are not parents, but are important people also. And I think our focus right now is to take care of their careers, their livelihoods, and ensure that they are safe. I think that's what I would put my priority right now, considering that COVID is not something that we are experiencing. This is our first time. So unfortunately, I don't have a perfect answer, which probably the person would have asked for. But I think as a mother of 2 kids, a woman, and a head of HR and CSR for the bank, this is my best answer that I can give while I'm just talking right now.
Fair enough. I'm going to move on to another questions before I start the rapid fire. Essentially, there is a lot of questions and of course some recent events that have happened, which has been adequately highlighted by the media. Is there a correlation between work from home, social distancing, and mental health? And if there is, what can organizations do to ensure that we prevent any such situations from happening? Because it's not just work from home. Work from home is not a choice anymore. It's essentially that's the only option. We are also talking about social distancing. And hence, does all of this have impact? Because there are enough conversations, there are enough talk that's going on around this area. What do you think, as people who have been from the HR fraternity, how do you view this? And anyone can go on to respond to that, and then I'll move on to the rapid fire.
So let me try.
Yes, Vinay.
So I'll take that. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be something which is a new social behavioral system. I mean, it's not something which is going to pass away after time, even if we find a solution to sort of get rid of COVID over a period of time. Because these are new habits which will form. And these habits will be there to stay. And I think it's for the good in some form, and it's not for so good in some other form. So I think if you look at the behaviors in form of thinking, feeling, and doing, and a very simple tripod, I think the thinking and doing is going to undergo a change, but feeling is something which I won't easily be able to modify. I think I still feel like having a social gathering with my friends. I still feel like attending a funeral or reaching out to someone who is ill. And I think all these is getting prevented today, and I don't know whether it's going to be, so new coping mechanisms will have to be developed around this. So it's going to be a large psychological effect on generations who are not used to behaving in this way. Maybe the younger ones will adopt and adapt very soon. But people from my generations or those who are in the mid age group would probably find it very difficult to deal with the feeling factor. I think doing and thinking is possible virtually.
Rajesh, you wanted to add something? Then I can move to the...
Yeah. So there are two situations to it. One, that while you're working from home, what we call it as home office and not working from home. Uh, so one is, do you have the adequate infrastructure to deliver from home? The second is, are you meeting all the requirements of the job? If you're able to do that, you're far more settled from that perspective. However, there are newer challenges which has come in the sense that if both the spouses are working, there are two children, and they need to attend online classes, and there are only two laptops. So how do you distribute the resources among them? And how would be the duties within the house? Because your maids are not coming, your cooks are not coming, your other side. So that has added to certain anxiety. But the primary thing is that how is your overall business doing? So think of an employee who works in airline industry. Now you can do as many digital motivational programs for them, but if the paycheck is not coming, if they know that they cannot go back to the work, it is bound to add to the as much anxiety which you think. The primary is that if you are able to run the business and there is certain amount of revenues constantly coming in, the pay and the job cuts fear are not there, people are far more settled whether you are working from home or we are working from workplace. So the impact on individual could be very, very sectoral. If you are in pharma, if you are in essential services, things are working fine for you. But if you are in other services industry where it is not working out fine, and every day there's a newspaper article saying company is downsizing, that company is downsizing, even if you're employed, the mental anxiety level goes up big time. So it's a very fine balancing act which companies will have to do and still run the business and get the revenue stream going. And it's a challenging time at this point of time. And yes, it will lead to lots of mental anxiety. So some of the things which we have done is to provide them an online counseling and healthcare advisory, which people can avail along with their family, which people find it well. You are a far more secured and a positive employee versus an anxiety-led if your business is not doing well.
Cool. I think thanks so much. I think we've quite a few other questions, but for paucity of time, I'll have to park some of them. We'll come to the rapid fire round, and this is a very simple round. I expect each one of you to respond in just one phrase, yes, no, or a number, because most of the questions will be of that nature, so that I can cover all of them as quickly as possible. So I'll start with you, Rajesh.
Yeah.
And these are overall comments. It's not just for your business, it's in general from an Indian economic perspective. So when do you think we'll get back to the pre-COVID levels of growth in India?
Q1 FY22.
Okay. And what about, would you think that in the next 12 months, we'll have less jobs in this country?
Yes.
Do you think the average wages are likely to go down?
Very marginally, yes.
And do you think that organization will increasingly have an antibiotic reaction to anything permanent in nature, whether it's permanent real estate, permanent employees, permanent compensation structure in the days to come?
Yes. So there will be, because if people would like to maintain the ratio of wage cost as a percentage of revenue. So if the revenues are not there what you want, there will be a reset on the wage cost as well. So that's
fair enough. And given the new norm, given how the world has changed, and given especially for you, you said that none of your employees were used to a work from home, or that was not really a norm. But now, going forward, what percentage of your workforce do you think will permanently work from home? When I say permanent, in the sense, it's the ratio. It may not be the same individual, but as a ratio, you see that they will work from home.
Yeah. So essentially our 70% of the workforce is field force. So we are finding that if they are not able to venture out from field, then they work from home. So as a transient population, the field force will be a 50-50 kind of situation if working from the field is not conducive. But the support functions, that can be 10 to 20% we see, where if not permanently, on an extended rotation basis, there'll be a new.
Sure. Okay. So
because we ran a small survey and we found an interesting thing. People actually raring to come back to office and not to work from home. Our survey, so it's a very internal in-house survey onto that. But we are trying to experiment with lots of things. If you say, have you formed up your answer? The answer is no. So that's why we have run a survey and we're trying to get some data and then align a policy around that.
So I don't know how much dependency your production units have on migrant labor, but let's assume that there is a dependency. What percentage of these guest workers have left? Left in the sense,
Yes.
left the production units and gone back home?
So when we started up production, when the lockdown started, the things were really bad. Against 3 shifts, we were able to run only 1 shift. So it's like 33% of the workforce. Today we have scaled up and we are able to run 2 shifts. So you can say we are 67 to 80% of the productivity, which we hope. So in a month or so, we should be able to reach 100% of the productivity.
Okay, cool. The last question, and this is a broad one because this is something based on some conversations I've been having, interesting ones.
Yeah.
The concept of dealers or channels, do you think that will undergo a massive change? Yes or no answer, honestly. The very fact, or let's just put it, let me make it much clearer. Do you think that there will be lesser dependency on dealers or channels in everyone's go-to-market strategy in the days to come?
Yes. If you want me to expand, I can expand, but the answer is yes, because of the new e-commerce channel, or even for the government. The government has come out with something called a GEM, Government E-Marketplace. So yes, there will be a shift, but the dealers will have to revamp themselves and start coming on the same platform. That's
cool. Thank you so much. I will move to you, Shanta. First questions, when do we go back to pre-COVID levels of growth?
Yeah, I wish I was an astrologer. And I don't have a quick answer for this. But, you know, like Rajesh said, it's a combination of revenue. It's all about how we're going to, how quickly we are able to reinvent. And maybe it'll take us about a year or so.
Right. So would there be less jobs in the next 12 months overall in the economy? And I know you're saying banking is hiring, but overall for the economy?
Yeah, so certain industries, yes, definitely there'll be less jobs like airlines, hospitality, service industries, customer service organizations. There will be less jobs, definitely.
Okay. Average wages, do you see them going down?
It depends on the industry, but otherwise, yeah, there will be an impact because it's directly correlated to revenue. How quickly we'll get our cost optimization in place, I think will define whether wages will be one impacting variable in the OPEX.
Sure. So do you think organizations will have an antibiotic reaction to anything permanent, which includes real estate, employees, compensation structures?
So there has been a reaction which is antibiotic when the thing happened. I think people are getting reasonable. Vinay actually touched upon a few of those points on real estate, etc. Because if you're going to get about 33 to 50% workforce back to work, then the balance 50% of real estate needs to be, you know, aligned accordingly. So yes, there will be a little bit of impact here and there. I mean, everything is antibiotic right now.
Right. How much, what percentage of your workforce will be permanently working from home here on?
So we haven't seen too much of people, and I completely echo Rajesh's views because we had also done a survey and everybody wants to get back to work. I think it depends on the public transport coming back. At branches, we see it becoming 100%. Where we do see people reducing would be maybe the corporate offices and the zonal offices, where we would probably work with a 50 to 60% of workforce, depending on the 6 feet norm or the 3 feet norm.
Absolutely. I mean, that's essentially largely the equation because of which there might be an impact. Yes, last question again, because you are a bank, do you think that there will be lesser relevance of dealers, franchisees, uh, the middlemen in the distribution layers.
So let me tell you that my grocer, my next door grocer versus probably buying my e-com goods from Amazon, I think my next door neighbor, my next door grocer has really upped his game. Okay, so he's got a Google form. You fill the form, he delivers to you. It comes at lightning speed. So I think it's all about reinvention. How are these dealers going to handle this, this change? It's all about service eventually. Are you going to give home service? I'm not comfortable going to a Starbucks anymore.
Exactly.
A Starbucks checks my temperature, then takes my order, and then makes me stand in another queue 6 feet apart. I don't see any feeling in that transaction. So I'd rather work with Starbucks to come home and give it to me, even if it's a cup of coffee. And probably that's what people will have to reinvent. How are you going to service your new customer in a digital footprint? So
Sure.
rather than talking about the dealer, I think it's about reinvention for all of them to service
Sure.
the customer at home.
Thank you so much, Shanta. Now over to you, Vinay. When do you think we will go back to pre-COVID level of growth? And yes, I am putting you on the hot seat to be the soothsayer and to predict the future.
Well, so I'll be a little more diplomatic. I think it should be within a year of the finding a vaccine or a treatment.
Yeah, so you've completely variabilized your prediction.
So I'm saying that 1 year it will take from the time you find a treatment or a vaccine to deal with this, and then the growth should come back. I think we are 6 years behind as of now.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading a story yesterday that J&J is expecting a release of a vaccine as early as 2021. So let's see how that goes. Do you think that there'll be less jobs in the next 12 months?
Not really. It is very sector dependent. So overall, I don't think so, because people will migrate from one sector to another, depending on what. I mean, and it's been a slower process pre-COVID, but there was a time when there was a pharma boom and there was a IT boom and there was a retail boom, and people have migrated accordingly. So I think that will happen.
What about wages? Do you see that going down?
I think the structuring of wages will be more on the variable front.
Right. So that's essentially my next question. That do you see more antibiotic reaction? In a way, you responded to that. Hence, I'll skip this question in your opening remarks. Also, do you think greater part of Indian workforce will be working from home? And if yes, what's going to be the percentage of those workforce?
So, the rigidity of some employers who had a very orthodox view on working from home has changed. However, the desire to work from home, which was in the pre-COVID area, has also changed. Now people are craving to go back to office because I have touched upon the feel factor earlier, and therefore there is something missing out of working from home. Plus, I agree with Rajesh when he said that there will be a lot of strain on sharing resources when you work from home. Whether it is space, whether it is gadgets, whether it is bandwidth, it's a lot of challenge. So I think it's going to be a good hybrid model in future.
Excellent. And what about the last question that we've been discussing about? Do you think that entire distribution framework with dealers, channels will become less relevant?
I'm not sure, because that also I will say it is sector to sector. Because in the our dealers in the financial services where I come from, the dealers actually sell tractors and automobiles, and I think the product is such that it's not going to be available very easily without dealers. So there will be a little bit of reduction, but largely the customers will prefer a renting model, I feel, rather than buying.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the last question was triggered because I saw Hyundai actually has launched a click and buy, which means they have done away with all the layers in between. You can buy a car online, you can test ride it online, they'll deliver it to you. You don't have to step out of your homes. So, and many people, experts in that sector, believe that that's how it's going to be. Even for servicing, you may not ever have to go to a service center ever again. So the very concept of, or rather the way service centers to look is likely to completely undergo a change if things pan out the way it is panning out right now with social distancing and so on and so forth. Thank you so much. I think we've really overshot of time in any case by about 23 minutes. Thanks for all the questions that have come from the participants. The link to this entire session in any case is available on YouTube in the TeamLease channel. Would also be adequately posted and shared with all of you through our social channels. And I would like to thank all our panelists and experts today. I think you brought in the right mix of optimism, realism, and caution, which I think all of us need to bear in mind in terms of planning how we will manage our workforce, how we will be putting India back to work, and that's clearly a priority. India cannot afford a large fiscal dole out, and that's our reality. And hence, the best dole out is to get people back to work, get economic activity, get activated, and that's probably the best way to get things going. And yes, the early signs are showing. I spend the entire morning reading 5-6 of these newspapers, and most of the headlines are talking about recovery. Most of the headlines are talking about how there's been improvement in terms of employment. And these are great signs. And I think it tells us that we are putting India back to work. Thank you so much. We'll see you again next Tuesday, same time, to continue to push our agenda forward in putting India back to work. Thanks again. Thanks, Shanta. Thanks, Vinay. Thanks, Rajesh.
Thanks, Ritu. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Vinay and Rajesh.
Thank you.
Bye.